I'm recording now. Okay. Review yesterday, we talked about in eukaryotes, chloroplasts are the sites of photosynthesis. So these are the thylakoid membrane, sacs of grana, little thylakoids, and light comes in, water comes in, light reactions happen. They take an ADP plus, an ADP and a phosphate. They produce ATP and an ADPH. The byproduct is oxygen, which just uses out. The Calvin cycle takes place in the stroma. That is the actual process where the sugars are synthesized, takes in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, utilizes an ADPH and ATP made in the light reactions to make a 3-carbon sugar. That's all photosynthesis in a nutshell, but we have to learn the details. So, why is this connected? I'm going to show you this little video.
Could a carbon atom that was once part of Albert Einstein be in you? All living things need to take in carbon-containing molecules to fuel their activity and build their cells. This is true for busy students and for all organisms. Let's look at how carbon atoms move through the carbon cycle in the Arctic tundra. Carbon atoms from carbon dioxide are incorporated into living things by producers, such as this plant. Carbon dioxide enters a leaf, moves into a cell, and goes into a chloroplast. There, in the process of photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is used to make sugar molecules. The sugars can be used to build larger carbon-containing molecules, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. In this way, carbon that was in the air is now part of the plant. When a plant is eaten by an herbivore, or primary consumer, carbon in plant tissue enters the primary consumer's digestive system. There, plant molecules are broken down. These small molecules are then used by the primary consumer to make larger molecules for building its own tissues. In this way, some of the carbon that was in a plant becomes carbon in a primary consumer. Similarly, when a primary consumer is eaten by a higher level consumer, some of the carbon in the primary consumer is incorporated into the higher level consumer. Carbon-containing molecules in dead plant material, animal feces, and dead organisms are taken up by decomposers, such as fungi and bacteria. Decomposers break down these materials and incorporate some of the carbon atoms into their own bodies. We have now seen how carbon moves from carbon dioxide to producers, to primary consumers, to higher level consumers, and to decomposers. How does carbon get back to the atmosphere? During cellular respiration, carbon-containing molecules are broken down and ATP is made. Carbon dioxide is released as a byproduct and returns to the atmosphere by producers, consumers, and decomposers. Overall, this return of carbon dioxide by cellular respiration is closely balanced by its removal from the atmosphere through photosynthesis. The global carbon cycle involves living things on land and in rivers, lakes, and oceans. And by the way, considering the huge number of carbon atoms in each person and how quickly carbon atoms move through the carbon cycle, there is almost certainly a little of Einstein in each of us.
Okay. We'll watch this later. Okay. Now we were talking about pigments yesterday and all this stuff. What is this?
The thylakoid membrane in chloroplasts contains light-absorbing molecules called pigments. Different pigments absorb light of different wavelengths. One pigment, chlorophyll A, absorbs mainly blue-violet and red light. This molecule participates directly in the light reactions. Another molecule, Chlorophyll B absorbs mainly blue and orange light. We do not see these absorbed colors when we look at a leaf. Instead, we see the green wavelengths that are reflected back from the leaf or transmitted through it.
Easy enough. Okay. We know about spectrophotometers. All right. I want to talk about this experiment that I told you shouldn't ignore in your book. So this is the absorption spectrum. You're familiar with that. We talked about it yesterday. Here's chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and the carotenoids. And so a guy named Engelmann did an experiment where he took filamentous algae, algae photosynthetic, and he put it onto a petri dish that had aerobic bacteria living on it. Okay, and what he did, and then he took and put it like on a light source. But under that light source was a prism, and the prism separates all the colors of light, so it's not just white. Does that make sense? And so, like, imagine you're looking down at this petri dish, and that's why you see all the different colors. And there was bacteria on the agar, and then the algae on top of the bacteria. And then he let it sit for a while, and then he noticed that the bacteria was all growing in certain colors of light, but it was not growing in this green area. Why does that make sense? The bacteria was aerobically respiring. So what does the bacteria need? Oh Lord, the bacteria did not need light energy because they're aerobically respiring. They're not undergoing photosynthesis. They need oxygen, all right? So to undergo cell respiration, yes, to make ATP. The algae is undergoing photosynthesis. What is a byproduct of photosynthesis? Oxygen. So what did this tell Engelmann about what the algae was producing that the bacteria needed in terms of the colors of light? What about green? It wasn't producing very much oxygen at all, which is indicative that the green light doesn't allow for photosynthesis to happen. Does that make sense? Okay. Like I said, these type of experiments are things you might be given data on the AP exam, and you have to interpret it. Okay. So this is this famous Engelmann experiment. That's how you spell his name. And so anyway, he basically just concluded that the algae was producing oxygen that the bacteria needed in all the wavelengths of light except for green. Okay. So this is, we talked about this yesterday, chlorophyll, the structure. This is a space-filling model of what chlorophyll looks like. It's just kind of interesting. We talked about the carotenoids and xanthophylls yesterday, and like I said, they don't participate directly in photosynthesis. This is their absorption spectrum, the carotenoids specifically, but they help to dissipate excess light energy. So they do absorb photons of light, but those aren't used for photosynthesis. It's just to dissipate it so the plants don't get harmed. So that's what the purpose of them for. Again, why leaves turn colors in the fall is because when the chlorophyll A and B starts to deteriorate, their carotenoids are left over, and notice they don't absorb anything over here in the yellow, orange, and red. The chlorophylls do, so that's why you see them change color. Eventually the carotenoids go away, and then the leaves die and they fall off. It's called a scission, and we'll talk about that in another chapter. All right, and I meant to get finished this morning, and I totally forgot. I'll do it tomorrow, but I want to talk about it today. So these chlorophyll molecules, we're going to do this. I'll do this tomorrow. This is basically a solution of chlorophyll exposed to black light. And it fluoresces like this pinky color. Anybody teacher do that in Bio 1? I'll do it tomorrow. So basically what happens is a chlorophyll molecule, when it absorbs light energy, there's electrons in chlorophyll that can get excited, and physically they jump up and work like an energy level. Do you remember you learned about the energy levels in physical science, physics, chemistry? I'm not sure. Where did you learn that? Chemistry? Okay, the electron will jump up to an excited state, and then it will fall back down. And in the process of falling back down to its normal state, it releases a little bit of heat, but it also releases a photon of light, and it will produce that fluorescence. Okay, now why don't plants fluoresce? The electrons get excited, but do they fall back down?
Isn't there energy?
Well, sort of. Yep, sort of. What happens to the one that finally gets excited? Yes, it's captured as a high energy state by the primary electron acceptor. Remember, you read about it? We'll talk about it. Anyway, so I'll show you that tomorrow. All right, so in the thylakoid membrane, there's a bunch of chlorophyll molecules organized together in clusters, and it produces something called a photosystem. This is a diagram of one of the photosystems, okay? All these green dots are chlorophyll molecules, all right? So these big purple things are protein complexes. Imagine this comes in front of the board too and goes obviously behind it. So there's all these giant protein complexes that have all these chlorophyll molecules in them. And I'm talking about the outer ones now, not the middle ones. These outer ones are what we call accessory chlorophyll molecules. And it's not labeled up here. But these sort of function like an antenna. You know the function of an antenna? To make the signal better, right? So an antenna basically has like a lot of different, the old ones, like has a lot of these different like branches. And increases the chance that the signal is going to be captured, and so you have a better like picture on your TV or something like that, right? So these accessory pigment molecules increase the chance that a photon of light will be absorbed by a photosystem. Instead of one photon of light having to hit that one cluster of chlorophyll, you can hit any of these around it, and eventually the energy is transferred there. Does that make sense? Called accessory or antenna pigment molecules. Okay. Now, in the middle of the photosystem is a special pair of chlorophyll molecules in the middle, these right here. And those are the ones that, when energy is sent to them from a photon of light, or a photon of light strikes it directly, an electron will be excited, but it won't fall back down. It gets captured by something called the primary electron acceptor. There are two photosystems in photosynthesis, photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. We'll talk about them in a minute. So let me kind of talk about what happens. So a photon of light strikes. Let's say it strikes this guy here. This one has basically these antenna pigment molecules transfer the energy from that photon from chlorophyll to chlorophyll to chlorophyll to chlorophyll until it gets to the reactions that are chlorophyll molecules. Okay? Once there, the electron gets excited and captured. High energy electron is stuck in that high energy state up there. And then something happens to it. All these words. No. Okay. I'm just going to go to a picture. And that's, all right. Now, in your book, there's two sets of pictures. This is one. I don't really like this one, personally. And then the other picture is that one. For some reason, that picture makes way more sense to me. I'm going to use both of them when I teach it to you. So I'm just telling you, like, I like this one personally better, but I'm going to talk, because it shows the structures and everything. I don't know why I like it better. But I'll go back and talk about the other picture, but I want you to keep in mind that this is actually how it's organized. So this is the thylakoid membrane here, okay? So these photosystems would be this one and this one, okay? Photosystem 2 is actually the first one. It was discovered second, so that's why it's called photosystem 2. Photosystem 1 is the second one, all right? They both are organized pretty much the same way. The primary chlorophyll molecules in each one are a slight difference, P680 and P700. All that means is that that's the best wavelength they absorb, 680 and 700, but, you know, chlorophyll, they can absorb anything in the chlorophyll spectrum. Connecting the two photosystems is a small electron transport chain, a really tiny one, okay? So P2 is called plasma quinone. It's just a little mobile electron bus shuttling electrons from photosystem 2 to this cytochrome complex. That's all it does. This, when the electrons pass through this cytochrome complex, they lose energy. The energy they lose is used to pump hydrogen ions from the stroma into the thylakoid space. Okay, that's what this red line is for. Then the electrons now don't have any more energy. They're moved by plasmocyanin PC to this photosystem 1. They get excited again, and then they move by pyridoxine, another little electron carrier, to this enzyme called an ATP reductase. I'm going to talk about all that. I like this picture better, but I'll go back to it. Okay. So this is photosystem 2, the very first one you see in photosynthesis. So a photon of light is absorbed, all right? Bounces around from the antenna molecule to antenna molecule until it gets to the reaction center of chlorophyll molecule. There, that energy is used and excites electrons. Okay, it gets captured in its high energy electron state. High energy state. All right, now, this chlorophyll molecule now is missing its electrons. So this electron is not going to go away. How does it get electrons back? Anybody remember? Water. This is where water comes into play in photosynthesis. Photosynthesis cannot happen without water. The water functions to split each hydrogen, and basically 2 electrons get excited here, 1 for each one. Okay. Each hydrogen atom in a water molecule donates an electron. One to fill that hole and one to fill that hole. So then you have 2 hydrogen ions. See that? And then you have half of an O2. Now really, to be honest, a half of an O2 is called a free radical. An O by itself is a free radical. They're highly damaging to cells. Have you heard of free radicals? Like antioxidants. You heard of antioxidants? They're like vitamins and stuff. They help combat free radical damage in your body. And O by itself will it's basically like a crazy wild toddler. It's like Chucky. Does anybody know that movie, that horror, from when I was a little kid, Chucky? Anyway, it goes around killing everything. So an O by itself actually doesn't exist. And you'd really, this, there would be another O right next to it. It would bond really quickly to make an O2. So that's why I don't ever write just an O, they write half of an O2. Does that make sense? It wouldn't allow that O to just hang out. Anyway. So free radicals are bad. So the function of water in photosynthesis is to donate electrons to the reaction center of chlorophyll in photosystem 2. To replace the electrons that have just left. To get excited. Got it? Okay. Now, the ones that are excited, hang out here for a minute. And then they pass down the little tiny ECT. Okay? Phosphoquinone takes them to the cytosine complex. They lose energy, pump hydrogen ions in a alkaloid state, create a hydrogen ion gradient. Eventually, they'll flip out of ATP synthase, eventually making ATP. So this yellow thing here is basically showing all this here. Okay? So they lose energy, hydrogen ions are pumped from the stromal into the alkaloid space, making a gradient. These 2 hydrogen ions made over here by the splitting of water also contributes to that gradient. They slow down the gradient through ATP synthase, which occurs somewhere else on the alkaloid membrane. As they power it, they produce ATP. Okay? That process of producing ATP in photosynthesis is called, yes, say it louder or better. Photophosphorylation. You need to know that. It's not up here. Oh. I'll write it up here. Photophosphorylation. It uses the energy of photons to phosphorylate ATP. That's where the word comes from. So remember, the ATP made in photosynthesis is only used to help make sugars. It's not used to do anything else. Remind me to do the class so I can forget, okay? Okay. Okay. Is everybody with me? Are you confused? Are you good? A lot of info, I know.
We don't have to know this.
You see, you need to know, no. You just need to know what they do. You don't necessarily have to know their names. Okay? All right. Then, the electrons move to a little PC, which is a little mobile carrier, and takes them back to photosystem 1. Now, pause. Let's imagine the electrons are hanging out on PC right now. I'm going to pause. Now, over here, photosystem 1 is also absorbing photons of light. Photon light gets absorbed, bounces around until it gets to the reaction center of chlorophyll. 2 electrons are going to be excited up here and captured by the primary electronic separator. Now, this reaction center of chlorophyll is missing its electrons. Where do they get filled? The hole there. That is one coming out of ECT. So phosphocyanine gives the electrons to those that have just recently lost their. Make sense? Okay. Once they're captured here, then what happens? Usually, or under linear electron flow, they go to a little mobile carrier called pyridoxine, Fc, that takes both of the electrons to an enzyme called NADP reductase. Now, reduction is the gain of electrons, right? So NADP plus reductase reduces NADP plus. It gives those electrons to a hydrogen ion and NADP plus. Both of them get one electron and put them all together and you make NADPH. Okay? So in the process, this is called linear electron flow. Linear means it moves in a straight line. Sort of. Okay, so these electrons started basically from water, but started here, get excited, lose energy, help make ATP, get excited again, and are put in an ADPH. They go in and they start and they have a finish. See that? Linear electron flow. Okay. Linear electron flow makes approximately equal amounts of NADPH and ATP. 6 and 6. Equal amounts. An equal ratio of ATP and NADPH. Both are needed in the Calvin cycle. I've never really thought this was useful. This is in your book if you think it's useful. Look at it. I don't know. All right. So let me go, hold on, to Calvin cycle. Okay, or just ignore the words. What I want you to do right now is count. How many ATPs are needed and how many NADPHs are needed? 9 ATPs and 6 NADPHs. So actually, more ATPs are needed than NADPHs in the Calvin cycle, right? So linear electron flow, like I just said, produces equal quantities, or even like a 1-to-1 ratio. The problem is the cell needs more ATP than an ATPH to undergo the Calvin cycle. Well, it would waste energy by making like 9 and 9 because it would make too much in ADPH, so it wouldn't be needed. So actually, photosynthesis has evolved a way to make extra ATP without making extra NADPH. And that's called cyclic electron flow. Okay, and that's what this picture is showing. So what happens in cyclic electron flow, and I'm actually just going to show you on this picture. Cyclic electron flow, the electrons once they get over here to pyridoxine, instead of going to NADP plus reductase, pyridoxine is a peripheral protein, and it's a mobile protein, kind of can move around on the membrane. Instead of just shuttling over here, what it does is it shuttles backwards and goes around the photosystem and drops off the higher energy electrons back here, back at the cytochrome complex. Then they travel down, lose energy, pump more hydrogen ions in, go to PC, get excited again. And they go basically in a circle like this. And that way we don't make any more of this, and we just make more of a gradient, so we can make more of this. That's called cyclic electron flow, and that's what that picture is showing. Here's the pyridoxine. See that? Yeah.
So is it like originally just linear electron flow until
Sort of. That people always, it's hard to understand, but you have to know that there's like thousands of these photosystems or these like light reaction protein complexes in every thylakoid or in every chloroplast. So some of them might be doing linear, some of them might be doing cyclic. You know what I'm saying? It's not just like one necessarily switching back and forth. They're like, some are doing one, some are doing another one, and they all can switch. The regulation of it is really complicated, and to be honest, I'm not sure they understand it. I've never learned it, and I've taken a lot of biochemistry. It's been a while, but you don't need to know. Just know that a lot of them are doing both. Yeah.
So like the NADP kind of acts like an inhibitor in that type of process.
You don't need to know anything about the regulation of it. So I'm just going to tell you there. To be honest, I've never learned it. It's never been in any of my textbooks. I've taken at least 4 plant biology classes, and none of it's ever been any there. Even biochemistry. I'm not sure they know, and if they do know, I never learned it. You don't need to know. There's got to be some sort of regulation. I just don't know. I don't know what it is. Okay. Now, I also want to point out the NADPH and the ATP are both made actually in the stroma. which makes sense because the Calvin cycle occurs in the stroma, right? So you don't have to worry about transporting them out of the thylakoid or anything like that. They're just there. Okay, questions about the light reactions? You want to see an animation?
Yeah.
Or I'm going to go on the Calvin cycle. Are you ready?
In bacterial photosynthesis, a single photosystem is involved. When an electron is energized by absorption of light, it is ejected from the photosystem reaction center. The electron then passes to ferredoxin and then down through the cytochrome B6F complex, plastocyanin PC, and finally back to the reaction center. The energy released during this electron transport generates a proton gradient which is used to produce ATP. Since the excited electron returns to the reaction center, this mechanism for making ATP is called cyclic photophosphorylation. The reducing power needed for biosynthesis is not generated in the process of cyclic photophosphorylation. Plants and cyanobacteria utilize two photosystems which work sequentially to produce both energy and reducing power. First, a photon of light ejects a high-energy electron from photosystem 2. The electron lost from photosystem 2 does not return to photosystem 2, but is replaced by an electron generated from the splitting of water and the production of oxygen. The electron then travels from the excited reaction center of photosystem 2 to plastoquinone, to the B6F complex, to plastocyanin, and finally to the reaction center of photosystem 1. This electron transport system generates a proton motive force that is used to produce ATP. Since the excited electron does not return to photosystem 2, this mechanism for making ATP is called non-cyclic photophosphorylation. When photosystem 1 absorbs a photon of light, it ejects a high-energy electron. The energy from this light absorption is used to generate reducing power in the form of NADPH. The ejected electron is replaced by an electron from photosystem 2.
All right. They didn't show the ATP part in the middle, did they? Right.
In plants, photosynthesis occurs in specialized organelles called chloroplasts. The internal membranes of chloroplasts are organized into sacs called thylakoids. Surrounding the thylakoid membrane system is a semi-liquid substance called stroma. Photosynthetic pigments are clustered together to form photosystems. When a photon of light strikes the reaction center of photosystem 2, it excites an electron. Two water molecules bind to an enzyme at the reaction center. This enzyme splits the water and uses the electrons from the water to replace the electrons removed from the reaction center. Oxygen is produced in this process. The primary electron acceptor for the light-energized electrons leaving photosystem 2 is plastoquinone. The reduced plastoquinone passes the excited electrons to a proton pump embedded in the membrane called the B6F complex. Arrival of the energetic electrons causes the B6F complex to pump protons from the stroma into the thylakoid space, thereby generating a proton gradient across the membrane. Because the thylakoid membrane is impermeable to protons, the protons in the stroma must pass through the channels provided by ATP synthase. As protons pass through, ADP is phosphorylated to ATP and released into the stroma. This process for making ATP is referred to as photophosphorylation. When photosystem 1 absorbs a photon of light, its reaction center passes high-energy electrons to ferredoxin. The enzyme NADP reductase then transfers the electrons to NADP to form NADPH. Electrons lost from photosystem 1 are replaced by electrons generated from photosystem 2. A small protein called plastocyanin, PC, then carries the electrons from the B6F complex to photosystem 1.
Did that help?
Yes.
Second one's a little better. Okay. Oh. Do you have any questions before I move on? We're going to keep going. All right, now, the Calvin cycle is where we have to go next. The Calvin cycle utilizes the products of the light reactions as well as carbon dioxide to make sugars. The Calvin cycle is called a light independent reaction because it doesn't need light directly. But remember, the Calvin cycle cannot occur without ATP and NADPH, which can't be produced unless this is happening. Or mostly, mainly, unless you're a CAM plant. We'll talk about it later. Okay, so I'm going to show you all these reactions, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you that this is complicated. There's a lot of enzymes here. They don't even name them. And you see how there's all these arrows over here that don't even show all the intermediates because they don't fully understand it yet. So the Calvin cycle is complicated. You just have to know kind of definitely the overall gist of it, but there's important parts in there you need to know. So I'm going to go over it. I also want to show you, hard to see it, but you say it says input 3 CO2. So this picture is showing 3 cycles on top of each other. These 3 don't enter all at the same time. They come in individually. Okay? So the cycle has to run 3 times before 1, 2, 3, 4 comes out. Okay? So imagine this is 3 cycles on top of each other. So there's 3 stages to the Calvin cycle. The first is called carbon fixation, then you have reduction, then you have regeneration. So I'm going to talk about them. The first part, carbon fixation, is literally what you're doing is you're fixing or capturing the carbon and putting it into a form that will stay in the cell. The enzyme, the only enzyme you need to know in all of photosynthesis is this one right here, called rubisco. Rubisco is the enzyme. Now, all the enzymes involved in here are all in the stroma, like I said. So rubisco will take the carbon dioxide and actually bond it to this thing called RUBP. Stands for ribulose bisphosphate. This means there's 2 phosphates in right here. And notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbons there. So you add 1 carbon dioxide to that, and you make 5 plus 1 equals 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons. So the product of 1 CO2 bonding to RUBP is this 6 carbon product right here. It is super unstable, like super unstable. So immediately it splits into 2 pieces. 2 3 carbon compounds. Okay? Like I said, this diagram is showing 3 cycles on top of each other. So that's why it says 6 of these. Okay? But 1 will split into 2. And there were 3 of these, and we're talking about 3 cycles, so 3 times 2 is 6. Does that make sense? This thing is called PGA, or phosphoglycerate. So we just fix the carbon into a stable form in the cell. That's all you did here. Okay? The next stage is called reduction, and this is when you add all those high energy electrons to it. Okay? There's enzymes involved. The first thing that happens is this thing, notice here, has 1 phosphate on it. So the first thing that happens is 6 ATPs come in. There's 6 of these. Each ATP adds a phosphate to all of these. Okay, so you make this phosphoglycerate. Notice the 2 phosphate groups. It makes it really unstable, more reactive, okay? And then the next step is an enzyme. There's enzymes here, they're not showing. catalyzes the reduction of the bisphosphoglycerate. So 6 NADPH come in, basically 1 NADPH per bisphosphoglycerate, add high energy electrons and hydrogens to this thing. Okay, producing D3P. In the process, the phosphate group pops off, the one you just added comes off, and it's gone. See that?
Phosphorylate, phosphoglycerate enzyme.
Notice there's no yellow circle over here. This comes in, adds yellow circles. That's the phosphate group. See that different? And then the next step, NADPH will come in. There's an enzyme doing all this we can't see, and adds electrons and hydrogens to this. We're not showing them. You don't need to know. Just know what happens. And in that process, the phosphate you just added pops right back off. Notice it's gone. And now this is G3P. I know this looks the same as that, but it's because they're not showing the carbons and the hydrogens and all that stuff. They're not showing it. You don't need to know that. But here we have G3P. We have 6 of them. At the end of the reduction phase, we have 6 G3P. What then happens is that once Lulu, what?
What happens to the NADP plus?
What happens to the NADP plus? Goes right back to the light reaction. Because in the light reaction, notice this enzyme, the NADP reductase, is on the stroma side. So it just bumps into this and then gets the electrons added to it again to make more NADP. Same thing with what happens to the ADP and phosphate. It just goes right back over here and gets rephosphorylated. Ask questions, please, if you have them. Yeah.
Okay, so you said phosphorylation, ATP only goes towards making sugars. So, like, how do the plant cells make ATP?
Now answer Graham's question. He said they have mitochondria too. Yeah. It's okay. At least you did it now and not like 2 days before you did it. He said how to make it ATP, like to do other work. Because they have mitochondria. If you were thinking it, it's guaranteed like 3 out. If you said it, like 3 out of at least 3 people thought it. So it's okay. You were just brave enough to ask. They have mitochondria. That's how they make it. Okay. But they use this sugar to undergo cell respiration. So that's part of it. All right. So notice you have 6 of these. One of them comes out. 5 minus 1 is 4. I mean, 6 minus 1. Sorry. I can't think. Okay. So then you have 5 of these. What's 5 times 3? 1 3 times 1 2 3 4 5. 15. The next stage over here, this regeneration phase, there's all these steps you don't need to know. All that happens here is notice the 5 G3Ps are reorganized to 3 RUBPs. These are 5 3 carbons, and this is 3 5 carbons. So they're like bonded, broken to make these, and phosphorylated together. So 3 ATPs are used also. So this has 2 phosphate components. Okay?
So, but all of this doesn't have to have like still 3 different cycles, right?
Yeah. It's complicated. So it's Calvin cycle, and we just made sugar. 1 D3P. So how many turns of the Calvin cycle before you make the equivalent of a glucose? 6. 3 turns make a G3P, and G3P has 10 carbons. So 6 turns would make the equivalent of a glucose. It would make 2 G3Ps. Right?
Yeah. Are we going to talk about them?
Yeah. Oh, there's your picture. Pretty sure. Yeah. Tomorrow. Tomorrow? Probably, and Thursday as well. We'll be working on this for the next 2 days. I don't know that I'm going to finish. Yeah. Okay. Y'all ready? Listen.
The Calvin cycle is a series of reactions that results in conversion of carbon dioxide into the organic molecules needed to build new cells. It occurs in the stroma, which is the area of the chloroplast surrounding the thylakoid membrane. During the Calvin cycle, carbon dioxide, CO2, is added to a 5-carbon molecule called RUBP. The resulting 6-carbon molecule is unstable and quickly splits into 2 3-carbon molecules called 3-phosphoglycerate. Using energy from ATP and reducing power from NADPH, which are products of the light reactions, the pair of 3-phosphoglycerates move through a series of reactions and are converted into 2 molecules of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. When several of these glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate molecules have been produced, some combine to make glucose, while others are reused in the Calvin cycle. To generate an entire new glucose molecule, the cycle has to turn several times, because each turn of the cycle adds only 1 carbon atom from each molecule of carbon dioxide.
Does that help? It's hard to find animations of the concept. What time do we get out of here? 12:15? Oh, good. Before we end, I want to take another picture of just y'all in here holding dude. Well, we got to take that shirt off and give it back to Jordan and put another shirt on him. I'm just telling you. We'll do that at the end of class. No. I've got some shirts in the cabinet that are like blue or red. Anyway, I want our picture to look more biology. Right.
I failed you.
Does y'all's brain hurt? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Let's finish this, so tomorrow you can do your drawing. All right, now. Most plants, like most of the plants that live in Colombia are what we call C3 plants. And C3 stands for 3 carbons. And when we initially fix the carbon, we produce a 3-carbon molecule. We produce a 6 one, but it splits really fast, really fast, to make a 3-carbon compound. See that? So most plants are called C3 because of that right there. Some plants that have evolved and they live in areas that are very arid or very hot, like hot and dry climates, have evolved different mechanisms to undergo photosynthesis to minimize something called photorespiration. So let me, hold on. I'm going to go to a different PowerPoint. I feel like, Jackson, were you confused about photorespiration? A little bit? That's fine.
No, I'm not.
Okay. So, how do plants get move their water through them? Through transpiration. Transpiration relies on stomata, or evaporation through stomata to produce that transpirational pull on the water molecules line. Remember that? Okay. Also, the stomata, the openings in the plant cells or the leaves, are where the gas exchange takes place. Okay. So in areas where the plant is losing too much water, it would be losing too much water when it's really hot. Okay, because hot weather increases kinetic energy, causes water molecules to evaporate faster, right? Okay, or it's really dry, or. Okay, Really dry increases the pull on the water molecules because things move from an area of low to high or high to low concentration, right? So if it's really dry, that means there's a really low concentration of water molecules and have a more of a tendency to leak or evaporate, right? So hot, dry climates, plants will lose a lot of water and sometimes too much water. So a way they conserve their water or prevent water loss is to close their stomata. They close them. The problem is when they close their stomata, what are they not getting anymore? They're not getting any more CO2. Okay, that's the problem. So what can happen is that the carbon dioxide is depleted because the CO2 that's left in the leaf in this mesophyll area will be used up by the Calvin cycle. And what starts to accumulate, because they can't escape, is oxygen gas, right? Now, why does it cause problems with the Calvin cycle? Because of rubisco. Rubisco is that only enzyme I told you need to know. Rubisco evolved a long, long time ago where there was no oxygen or very little oxygen in the atmosphere. And so during the evolution of rubisco, it didn't have to evolve a mechanism to basically avoid oxygen because there was no oxygen. So basically rubisco is a weird enzyme because it can have two substrates. It can take in CO2 or it could bind to O2 and bond it as well. So that's the problem. Because when rubisco, like when the O2 concentration is really high relative to CO2, it will take the oxygen and it bonds it and puts it on RUBC. Well, that doesn't make a 6-carbon compound that then splits into 2 and continues the rest of the Calvin cycle. What it does is make another compound that the plant cell can't use. It actually has to go back and reconvert it, and it actually uses up its energy. And it actually in turn breaks down sugars and doesn't help to build them. This process is called photorespiration. And it's not what plants need to do. It's actually bad for them.
I understand why, if they are wrong, why are they so complex?
Well, because most plants don't live in climates that it would happen a lot. So the plants that do live in those climates have evolved mechanisms to avoid photorespiration. Like cacti. Succulent, things that are succulents like aloe vera plants, cacti, things like that, those are can plants. But also sugar cane, stuff like that, undergo C4 photosynthesis. We'll talk about them. Hold on. Hello. Who? Pranati?
Oh.
It's okay. Yeah. Sure. Okay, you're leaving? Yeah, they did not. She did not know how to say it.
It's like, why are you leaving?
Like, Pranati? I don't even know what she said. Okay. All right. So that's called photorespiration, and that is not what plants need nor want to do. It wastes their energy. Well, this is just some data, but it decreases photosynthetic output. Anyway, so there are two different mechanisms that have evolved to reduce photorespiration: C4 and CAM. Okay, and we're going to talk about it. Don't write this down right now. I have slides on all of them. So C4 plants examples are sugarcane, corn. These generally live in really arid climates. It's not like deserty, but it's really dry and hot.
Can you be recording?
Go to my Google Plus site and just look. You'll see it. I made them all public now. So you can just find it. Just go. She knows you're coming. Okay, so what happens in C4 plant is this. Now, let me tell you the reason why it's called C4 is because the initial fixation of carbon produces a 4-carbon compound. It's familiar. It's called oxaloacetate. Where do we see that before? Right. Okay. Anyway, so don't write anything down, please. Just look at me and watch. The way C4 plants work is that they physically separate the initial fixation of carbon from the actual Calvin cycle. So their leaf structure is different. So there are a series of these mesophyll cells on the outside. They're called like regular mesophyll cells. But on the inside, instead of having spongy mesophyll like we were familiar with on the oldie, there are what we call bundle sheath mesophyll cells. They're these guys right here. And the bundle sheath mesophyll cells directly surround the vascular tissue, the xylem and the phloem. Okay? So these are very different cells. And notice the mesophyll cells on the outside, and the bundle sheath cells are on the inside. So over here, we're just looking at these two right here. Mesophyll and then bundle sheath. So the mesophyll cell would be the ones near the stomata. Okay? So the stomata, like when they're open, carbon dioxide can come in, and there's an enzyme called PET carboxylase, which will capture it, bond it to PEP, which is a 3-carbon methoxylacetate. This is converted to another 4-carbon sugar, and it'll just stick, and make a lot of these. Okay, but these don't immediately go into the carbon cycle, right? And if the stomata closed, well, oxygen will build up, but it'll build up in this cell, but not down here. The carbon cycle is actually down here. And so these 4-carbon compounds will then diffuse through plasmodesmata, remember that? Plant colors on food. Diffuse into the bundle sheath cell, an enzyme will take off the CO2, which makes this fat pyruvate. Interesting. And the CO2 will enter in the carbon cycle. So because it's physically separated, the oxygen might build up in the mesophyll cell when the stomata are closed, but it won't move into the carbon cycle. Very little of it will. So it'll maximize the exposure of rubisco to carbon dioxide and minimize its exposure to oxygen because it physically separates the process. Okay? Anyways, then that goes right into the flow of the sugars. Oh, okay. PET carboxylase, also the enzyme that initially captures it, is not like rubisco. It won't take in oxygen. Like it just won't do it. So when oxygen builds up in here, it won't do this. Doesn't work. Okay? But if you want to write how you do.
So the mesophyll cell, like what is?
So light reactions occurring there.
So like,
Yeah.
Is there like an excess or possible activate that are in it or be used in register?
No, this is all in the chloroplast.
Oh,
It'll all be used in the carbon cycle.
okay. So it doesn't work.
In excess, it'll just store it and then eventually extract the CO2 from it to undergo carbon cycle. This is a completely different organelle. Some people, I'm sure, were thinking that it would be effective, but no.
why do you like the pyruvate? Like what is?
The pyruvate, the product will diffuse back into the mesophyll cell, become phosphorylated by ATP, and produce PET, which will then go back to the PET carboxylase will add a CO2 to it and make more of this. Like this would move back up here. This whole process notice uses some ATP, but it's worth it because it minimizes better respiration. Just a lot of information in a short time period on that. The last thing we have to do is talk about CAM plants. And now look, before we do that, this is regular C3 plants. Do you see the difference? These mesophyll cells, and then here's the bundle sheath. A little bit different. All right. CAM plants are different. CAM plants, I'm just going to talk about it. This PowerPoint should be in the Dropbox. It is not. CAM plants, physically, it's called crashulation acid metabolism. You don't really ever need to know that. Just know CAM plants, okay? What they do is so this diagram's in your book. This is showing C4 physically separates the different cells, okay? CAM plants don't have any difference in their cell structure, but what they do is they temporally or time of day separate the initial fixation of carbon from the carbon cycle. So what happens is that CAM plants open their stomata at night, okay? CO2 will diffuse in, and they do kind of a similar thing in that they fix it into a 4-carbon organic acid or a 3-carbon organic acid, but they store it in their central vacuole. They store it. They store huge quantities of this. They fix it all night long. Fix. Store. They physically can't undergo the Calvin cycle at night because there is no ATP and ETH because there are no photons, right? So they just store all this organic acid. During the daytime, they close their stomata. They extract the CO2 from what they fix at night, then they can run the Calvin cycle. So they separate the fixation of carbon from the Calvin cycle by time of day. You don't need to know it. I'm not even sure it's in your book. These books. They don't even tell you. Okay, so like I said, Rubisco evolved. Like, why did this happen? It evolved before there was any O2 or very little O2 in the atmosphere. It didn't have to evolve a way to exclude oxygen. So anyway.
So would the acid type, like CO2 and O2, how similar really are those doses that the acid type would accept?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. There wasn't a strong selection pressure against O2 because there was no O2. So it very rarely, if ever, would take it in. So the thing is that when it started to like come about in terms of really large quantities, I mean, the CO2 just has a carbon versus the O, just regular O2. So they're not that different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I thought enzymes were like some sort of.
Well, most of them are. What I'm saying is Rubisco's not. It has to do with what it bonds to what. And so in the CO2, I have to pull out some biochemistry textbooks. But, you know, anyway, it can do both. So, not seeing. Yeah, okay. That's good. Now, we have time. Tomorrow, y'all are going to work on this. You have a big packet with questions that you'll be modeling photosynthesis, all of it. So, yeah. You'll do it tomorrow and probably on Thursday. Your test is going to be Monday. We might do a mini lab thing on Friday. And I won't move on Friday. I won't. So, you don't really do anything. I just show it to you. But yeah, I'll do it. Okay. That's enough for today. All right, y'all find a place. I want to take a picture of in my room with the monkey gorillas.
What is the name of the Oh, y'all put the flag up there? Yeah.
You ready to get your shirt off? What? You ready to pick up your shirt?
Pick your. Never mind. I'm sorry. You get to fix this.
I logged in. I thought you were born.
No, that's not how great works.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, y'all get together up here. Whatever. You can wear your hat.
Made in America flag.
You have to wear your hat.
Oh.
I mean, I'm a white stripe, so all I have to do
I never, yeah.
Y'all get together.
And my
Get together, come on.
Well, I did see the room.
Y'all can like stand on the bed.
I'll just stand over
Put your shoulders in here right now. Or like get on your knees, on your knees.
I'm too whatever. Hey, wait, why was the shorts go up there?
Get on your knees. Well, fall. Probably not the best spot. Don't fall.
Yeah, no, that's probably a no.
Oh my God, yeah.
I'm gonna let that go.
I think we're I don't think it's not the tallest person.
That's okay. Maybe see everybody Jackson, we can't see. Come on.
Stand on the
We should get an award for the best class school campus.
Yeah, seagulls. Some people like it. I'd rather on the other side. Okay, guys, ready? What? Make
Stole mine. I know.
And then made it pop out.
Alright.
I'm just gonna have more of these things. I went there before school, I came here with a scratch.
Well, then,
I'm gonna go find your line.
As long as it's 17 or
I mean, like, I'm scared, but like,
I really fit. I'm like, okay, it's there.
Where are you going? Oh, you're going to It was super hot. I want one thing. It was like,
Tori, were you with Thomas yesterday when I sent him a text? I was silver nailed yesterday. I was. Did he tell you?
yeah. This spider got earlier today.
I was like, where's Waldo yesterday? I was wearing a mask. Right. And, I was walking up the stairs, the middle stairs from the first floor during lunch. And she was a teaching young lady. And I turned around, she didn't know it, like, she was like, oh, I thought you were here. And I was like, and she goes, well, you're good, I was making you take off that hat.
They're really funny.
I was like, well, yeah. Anyway.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the.
No, they're on the side.
Put the Krishna photos in.
They are.
Oh, they are?